much is only about a month away. The car's pretty much ready to go. A few last minute preparation items to complete, and one of those is to do a full flush of the brake fluid. Try to do that at least once a year, regardless of how much work the car's done. Brake fluid's hydroscopic, so it will get water infused into it even from the atmosphere, and if you get too much water into the brake fluid and you get the brakes too hot, you'll boil and you get your brake pedal fall into the floor. Not ideal. So that's today's mission. First thing to do is jack the car up and rip the wheels off. Okay, we're going to start on the front circuit. There's no particular reason for that. The front and rear are two completely separate isolated systems with their own master cylinders, so it doesn't matter which one you start with. But I'm going to start on the passenger side because it's the furthest away from the master cylinder, so it's got the longest brake line to it. And I'm going to start on the outside of the AP caliper. The AP calipers have a bleed nipple on both sides, so you've got to do both. You obviously get the majority of the fluid out on this side, but you'll still get a cavity on the other side where brake fluid will sit, so that's why I'm going to bleed both sides. I've got a little catch can here with a little hook to try in vain to stop me knocking the brake fluid over all over the floor, but I always seem to do it, hence putting a towel down. So I guess it's time to start pumping the brake pedal. But I can already hear everyone say, "Colin, you haven't got any friends. Who's going to pump the brake pedal for you?" And to that I would say that is correct, and also a little bit mean. But I've got something better than a friend. I've got a bottle of compressed argon off my welder. And that's better than a friend because that will bleed my brakes and not empty my beer fridge at the same time. So how's all this going to work? Well, it's pretty simple really. Just going to use the pressure from the argon to push the fluid out instead of relying on the piston of the master cylinder to push the fluid through the system. I think this works really well for a couple of reasons. One is that obviously you only need one person to do it, and the second is that I've found in the past that the act of actually pressing the master cylinder and moving the piston around can aerate any bubbles that are in the system and make it much harder to bleed. Not so much an issue when you're just flushing a good system through, because there shouldn't be any air bubbles in there, but if you're trying to bleed a brand new system, then this seems to work really, really well. So just got an old reservoir cap that I've sheened up a little fitting to accept the air line, and that just pushes on there like that. No clamp or anything, because that just acts as a bit of a safety relief valve in case things go haywire. Just put that on the reservoir. The other good thing about using a TIG setup is you get a really nicely controlled flow meter, so I can just put in a tiny amount of pressure. There's a tiny little bit of air argon coming through, probably too much there. I'll just turn it down. You only need just a little bit of positive pressure to push the fluid through. That's probably enough. I've already opened up the bleed nipple on the other side, so we can just put that on there. And slowly watch the fluid go down the reservoir. Other good thing about this is if you've got your shit together, you've even got time to go and get a beer while you're bleeding the system. Alright, well that worked as planned. The fluids got down to the minimum level on the reservoir, so I've turned the gas off, and now I'm just going to top it up with some brand new fluid. Just using Penrite DOT 4, haven't gone the full race 10/10 Penrite brake fluid that's available. The boiling point of that is a little bit higher, but this car's so over braked I've never ever had any issues with fluid boiling. So for about a quarter of the price I'll just run this stuff. A few reservoirs full of new fluid flushed through to that wheel now, so pretty confident we've got new fluid all the way through that line. So now what I'm going to do with a new reservoir of fluid is put the pressure back on, walk over and nip up the nipple on that brake with the positive pressure from the gas on it, rather than turning the gas off then walking over and nipping up the nipple, and that just stops the brakes from relaxing and maybe sucking a tiny little bit of air back into the caliper. So that's what we'll do now. So just a tiny bit of gas. Just to get some positive pressure. You don't want too much, because if there's too much there, when you nip it up it could overload the system. So that's the fronts all done, so we're on to the rears now. I'll put some pressure on the rear reservoir. I've got the rear left bleed nipple cracked open, and you'll get a feel for how slowly the fluid drops down if you only put a little bit of pressure on. I'll turn the pressure on now. There you can see the fluid slowly dropping down the reservoir. This is really good because it gives you, there's very little chance that you'll accidentally induce air into the reservoir by going too low. So that's about as low as I'm prepared to go. I'll turn the gas off, and all we need to do is just unscrew the top and throw in a bit more fluid. So one little tip for doing this job is the what spanner you're going to use. So on the front, on the AP calipers, there's a really nice big 11mm hex on the nipple, so you're pretty safe to use an open ender on that and get away with it. On the rears here, on the wheelwoods, they're a little 1/4 inch nipple, and you'll round those off really quickly if you try to use an open end spanner, so you end up needing to use a ring. So first thing to remember is make sure you put the ring spanner on before you put the sort of recovery system over the nipple. But then the problem you have there is that you only have a limited amount of swing on the spanner, because you'll end up colliding into something. So you've got to make sure you get the most amount of travel to make sure that you lift the nipple off the seat to actually get some flow through. So all I can get is half a turn here, which is just enough to lift the nipple off the seat and actually get some flow through the caliper. So that's the last one done. Another little tip is, if you're going to make yourself a little catch tank for the waste fluid, it's definitely worth drilling 2 holes in the lid so that you can actually put the other end of the tube back into that hole and minimise spillage when you remove the tube full of brake fluid. So what I try and do is grab the tube as close to the nipple as possible, because we all love getting close to the nipple, and squeezing it as hard as possible, lifting it up, letting it drain in, and then hopefully you can put it in the other hole and minimise that horrible brake fluid everywhere. So while we're here, I have to fess up and show you the worst, most horrible custom tool I think I've ever seen that I actually made, which is this little thing. It's a little 1/4 inch spanner with a bolt welded to the end of it. Isn't that horrendous? And I had to do that to give me enough leverage, but to also allow me to clear the panhard rod at the back. Yeah, that lives at the bottom of the toolbox where no one can see it. So there you go, that's my no-friend way of bleeding brakes. You can get the clear plastic tube that I use to collect the brake fluid from Bunnings. You can even get the pure argon from Bunnings now. So the fact that you can't get a friend or someone in the house to sit in your car for hours while you yell in, out, up down at them is no excuse to not change your brake fluid. Anyway, Bathurst is on, so I'm going to have a beer. Catch you next time.